Chapter 1: The Disappearance. It begins with a feeling, a stirring beneath the skin, an unease curling around the edges of a quiet morning. Nick Dunn wakes on the 5th anniversary of his marriage with a single thought, his wife's head not in the way a man might think of his beloved, but in a stranger, darker way, imagining the shape of her skull, the ridges beneath her golden hair, the secrets her face might hold. For a moment, he lingers in bed, staring at the ceiling. The morning light filters in, dull and indifferent, casting long shadows across the room. 5 years. An anniversary. A milestone. And yet, the weight in his chest feels heavier than it should. He exhales slowly, peeling back the covers, planting his feet on the floor. Amy isn't beside him. The house is quiet. He moves through the house with slow, measured steps. Something about today feels wrong. By the time he steps outside, the Missouri heat is already creeping in, wrapping around him like a second skin. The road is empty. The morning still young. He drives to the bar, a modest little place he co-owns with his twin sister, Margot. The bell jingles softly as he steps inside. The air is thick with the scent of old wood and coffee, a familiar comfort. Margot is already there, wiping down the counter, her sharp eyes flicking up as he approaches. "Happy anniversary," she says, voice laced with something wry. Nick forces a smile, sinking onto the stool across from her. "Yeah, 5 years." There's something in his tone that makes Margot pause. She sets the rag aside, leaning forward slightly. "How are things?" He exhales, running a hand through his hair. He doesn't answer directly, and he doesn't have to. Margot knows. She doesn't press. Instead, she slides a mug of coffee in front of him, watching as he wraps his fingers around the ceramic. For a moment, they sit in silence, the low hum of the morning settling around them. And then, his phone rings. A sharp sound that cuts through the quiet. He pulls it from his pocket, glancing at the screen. A neighbor. "Nick, you need to get home, now." The voice is tight, urgent. A cold knot forms in his stomach. "What's wrong?" "The door was wide open," the neighbor says. "It doesn't look right." Nick is already standing, his chair scraping against the floor. Margot watches, concern flickering across her face as he mutters a quick explanation and heads for the door. The drive home is a blur, his hands gripping the wheel a little too tight. His mind races, 1,000 possibilities colliding all at once. When he pulls into the driveway, dread slithers up his spine. The front door gapes open, as if the house itself is gasping for breath. He steps inside, and the silence is suffocating. The living room is a wreck, furniture overturned, shattered glass glittering on the floor. A struggle, a fight. His pulse hammers against his ribs as his eyes sweep the room, searching for some sign of Amy. Nothing. Amy. No response. The air is thick with absence, with a question he doesn't want to answer. Where is she? His fingers tremble as he pulls out his phone, dialing 911. When the officers arrive, they move with practiced efficiency. A missing woman, a ransacked home. Their eyes sweep over the scene, then land on Nick. Detective Rhonda Boney steps forward, her expression carefully neutral. She studies him, already assessing. "Mr. Dunn," she says, voice even, "can you walk me through your morning?" Nick swallows, his mouth suddenly dry. I went to the bar, had coffee with my sister. Then I got a call from my neighbor. Came home, found this. Boney nods slowly, jotting something down in her notebook. Beside her, Officer Gilpin scans the room, his gaze lingering on the broken furniture. No forced entry, he murmurs. Nick shifts uncomfortably. What does that mean? Boney looks up, studying him with quiet intensity. It means Amy may have let her attacker in. Or there was no attacker at all. The words sink in slowly, like stones dropped into deep water. Nick swallows hard. His wife is missing. But standing there, beneath the sharp gaze of the police, he realizes something chilling. They don't see a husband desperate to find his wife. They see a suspect. Chapter 2, The Perfect Marriage, Flashbacks from Amy's diary. This is a story about love, about a boy and a girl, about a marriage. Amy Elliott Dunn writes in delicate loops, her pen gliding over the smooth pages of her diary. She writes to remember, to hold on to the truth before it slips away. She remembers the beginning, the first time she saw Nick Dunn. He was charming, witty, effortlessly confident in a way that made her breath catch in her throat. It wasn't just his looks, though he was handsome, with his sharp jawline and easy smile. It was the way he carried himself, the way he spoke, leaning in just slightly, like he had a secret only she could hear, like she was the most fascinating person in the room. And he liked her, really liked her. Amy had spent her life being admired. People saw her and saw amazing Amy, the fictionalized version her parents had created for their best-selling children's books. A flawless, bright, successful girl. But Nick looked at her and saw something else. Not a character, not a polished version of herself, just her. She remembers the way he made her laugh, real laughter, the kind that bubbled up from deep inside. The way he could finish her sentences as if they were speaking in a language only they understood. Their first kiss had been on a freezing New York night, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones. He had leaned in, his lips brushing against hers, warm, unexpected. She had smiled against his mouth. "You taste like sugar," she had murmured. Nick had laughed. "Powdered sugar, from the donut I just stole for you." The world was different then. New York City was theirs, a playground of possibility. They walked the streets at night, fingers intertwined, the city lights painting them in soft golds and blues. They whispered about the future in darkened cafes, their knees pressed together beneath tiny tables. Everything felt electric, like they were characters in a story too perfect to be real. Nick made her feel seen, not as amazing Amy, not as an idea, an expectation, but as her, Amy. He made her feel adored, and she adored him in return. The early days of their marriage had been golden, sweet, and effortless. On their first anniversary, he had planned something special, a scavenger hunt, little clues tucked away in places only she would understand. Their favorite bookstore, the cafe where he had first kissed her. The last note had led her home, where Nick had been waiting, a mischievous smile on his lips, a bottle of champagne in hand. "To us," he had whispered, pressing his forehead against hers. He was thoughtful then, attentive, but even fairy tales have their shadows. The world they had built began to change. The layoffs came first. Nick lost his job as a writer. Then she lost hers. New York, their beautiful, sprawling city, suddenly felt smaller. The walls of their apartment felt closer. They tried to hold on, to weather it together. But slowly, the magic dimmed. Then came Missouri, Nick's hometown. He wanted to go back, to take care of his mother, who was sick, to start fresh. Amy wanted to be the good wife, so she agreed. Missouri was different, quieter, slower, and so was Nick. At first, it had been easy to convince herself it would be okay. A new adventure, a new home, a new life. They bought a house, a charming old place with creaky floors and too many windows. She decorated it with careful hands, made it beautiful, tried to make it theirs. But Nick stopped trying as hard, stopped looking at her the way he once did, stopped touching her without thinking. The scavenger hunts disappeared. The effortless charm faded. At night, he sat in front of the television instead of talking to her, and she smiled anyway. She kissed him goodnight. She told herself this was normal. Marriage changes, doesn't it? But she knew better. She could feel it. The slow, creeping realization that she had married a man who was no longer the one she had fallen in love with. Nick, once so driven, so full of ambition, had settled. And worst of all, he seemed fine with it. Amy doesn't write that part in ink. Not yet. She keeps her diary neat, lovely, a record of a marriage that was, at one time, perfect. But she knows better. Perfect never lasts. Chapter 3. The investigation begins. The house is too quiet, too still. Detective Rhonda Boney steps carefully through the front door, her sharp eyes sweeping over the room. A crime scene, a story waiting to be told. She can see it. The way the furniture has been knocked askew, the shards of broken glass glinting in the late afternoon light, the overturned ottoman, the smear of something dark on the kitchen tile. Not enough blood to say violence, just enough to say something happened here. Beside her, Officer Jim Gilpin lets out a low whistle. Messy, he mutters, but controlled. Boney nods. Controlled. Staged. She turns her attention to the man standing in the center of it all, Nick Dunn, the husband. She watches him closely, the way he shifts his weight from one foot to the other, the way his hands are shoved deep in his pockets, the way he doesn't seem frantic enough. Nick runs a hand through his hair. His expression flickers between concern and something else, something hard to place. "Tell me again," Boney says. "You came home at what time?" Nick clears his throat. "Around 11:30, and the door was open." "Yeah, and this is how you found the place." He hesitates, just for a second. "Yeah." Boney glances at Gilpin. A subtle shift of energy between them. Nick is watching them now, his eyes darting from Boney's face to Gilpin's, like he can sense something is off. Something is off. Boney steps toward the broken coffee table. "No signs of forced entry," she murmurs. "No major struggle." "Maybe she let someone in," Gilpin offers. Boney hums in agreement, then looks at Nick. "Did Amy have any enemies?" Nick exhales, rubbing the back of his neck. "Number no one I can think of." "And you? Anyone who might want to hurt your wife? Or you?" Nick frowns. "No." Boney studies him, tapping her pen against her notebook. "Where were you this morning, Nick?" Nick doesn't answer right away. "The bar, with my sister, Margot." "From what time to what time?" 8 a.m. to around 11:20. "And before that?" Nick pauses. "I was home. Alone. No alibi." Gilpin jots something down. Nick shifts again, shoving his hands even deeper into his pockets. "You seem composed, Mr. Dunn," Boney says lightly. Nick blinks at her. "What do you mean?" She tilts her head just slightly. "Your wife is missing, but you're standing here, not pacing, not demanding we tear the whole town apart looking for her." Nick opens his mouth, then closes it. He doesn't know what to say, and that, more than anything, makes him look guilty. Outside, the media has already gathered. A missing woman, a handsome husband, a perfect marriage. It's the kind of story that spreads like wildfire. Cameras flash as Nick steps outside. Reporters shout his name. Questions swirl in the thick July air. Accusations disguised as inquiries. Mr. Dunn, did you have anything to do with your wife's disappearance? Nick, can you tell us about your marriage? Nick, where is Amy? His lips curl into an awkward smile, a reflex, a terrible, terrible mistake. The cameras catch it, the world sees it, and just like that, Nick Dunn becomes the husband who isn't grieving enough. Later, when the house is empty, when the police have finished dusting for fingerprints and combing through Amy's belongings, Nick finally exhales. His heart is still racing, his mind still tangled. He walks through the house, moving room by room, as if expecting Amy to suddenly appear. She doesn't. She is gone, for real. And then, his eyes catch something. A small envelope on the kitchen counter. Neat handwriting, feminine, for Nick. His breath catches. His fingers hesitate before picking it up. It's a clue, the first clue. Amy's annual anniversary scavenger hunt. The tradition had started in the beginning, when things were good. Amy had always been the planner, the clever one. Every year, she crafted a treasure hunt of memories, inside jokes, shared moments, private references only the two of them would understand. But now, as he holds the envelope in his shaking hands, it doesn't feel romantic. It feels wrong. Nick swallows hard. He slides his finger under the seal, pulling out the delicate piece of paper inside. Amy's words stare back at him. A riddle, a secret, a message from a wife who is now missing. The scavenger hunt has begun, but this year, it might not lead to something good. Chapter 4. The Truth About Nick. Nick Dunn is not the perfect husband. He knows this. He has known it for a long time. But no one else knows. Not yet. He stands in front of the mirror in his sister's house, the house he has been staying in since Amy disappeared. His jaw is tight. His eyes are hollow. He is trying to look like a man who is grieving, a man who is broken, a man who is not hiding something. The cameras will be on him soon. The news stations have already started running stories dissecting his every move. The awkward smiles, the lack of tears, the way he seems wrong. Nick knows what they are thinking. He knows what they are saying. And they don't even know the worst of it. Because Nick Dunn has a secret with soft skin, a secret with honey blonde hair, a secret named Andy. For over a year, Nick has been sleeping with one of his students. She is young, too young, 23, bright-eyed, full of admiration for the man who teaches her about writing, who whispers in her ear late at night, who kisses her like she is something new, something untouched, something that makes him forget. Andy, sweet, beautiful, stupid Andy. She calls him baby, runs her fingers through his hair. She doesn't nag, she doesn't correct, she doesn't know him, not the way Amy does. Nick had told himself once that it didn't mean anything, that it was just a mistake he kept making. But now his wife is missing. Now the world is watching, and if they find out about Andy, he is finished. The press conference. Amy's parents stand at the podium, holding hands, their grief raw, real, perfect for the cameras. They love their daughter. They want her home. And Nick stands behind them, his hands clasped, his expression carefully composed. Amy Elliott Dunn is the love of our lives, her mother says, voice thick with emotion. She is kind, she is generous, she is brilliant, and someone took her from us. Nick stares down at his shoes. Please, if anyone has seen anything. Nick feels the shift before he even hears it. The crowd is turning. The sympathy is running dry. Because no one is looking at Amy's parents anymore. They are looking at him, Nick Dunn, the husband who won't cry, the husband who smiles at the wrong times, the husband who, suddenly, looks very much like a killer. Then, her mother says it. Nick, do you have anything you'd like to say? He steps forward. He clears his throat. He looks into the cameras. And he lies. I just want my wife back. The diary. The police find it later that evening. A small, elegant diary tucked away in the back of a drawer. Amy's words, written in neat, controlled script. A record of a marriage. A record of fear. Detective Rhonda Boney turns the pages carefully, her brow furrowing as she reads. Nick gets angry sometimes. He has a temper. I try not to upset him. I am so scared. Page after page, Amy tells her story. How Nick changed. How he became cold, distant, cruel. How she worried about his anger. How she feared, in the darkest moments, that he might actually hurt her. Boney exhales slowly, pressing her lips together. She doesn't want to jump to conclusions, but she lifts her eyes to Gilpin, who is already looking back at her. We have a problem, she says quietly. The walls close in. The press is merciless. By morning, the headlines are screaming. Husband behaving badly. The case against Nick Dunn. Amy was scared of him. Nick reads them all. His stomach twists. He sees the way people look at him now, not just reporters, not just strangers. Margot, his own sister. She hasn't said anything, not yet. But Nick sees the question in her eyes, the one she is too afraid to ask. Did you do something to Amy? Nick Dunn is not the perfect husband. He never was. But now, the world thinks he is something much worse. And maybe, just maybe, they're right. Chapter 5. The Cool Girl's Revenge. Amy's perspective revealed. Amy Elliott Dunn is dead. At least, that's what the world thinks. At least, that's what she wanted them to think. Because Amy Elliott Dunn is also brilliant, and she is very much alive. The plan. Amy had always known how things would end. She had spent a year crafting her masterpiece, a puzzle so intricate, so perfect, that no one would ever believe Nick was innocent. Every step, every detail was planned. The diary, a masterpiece of lies, a slow, careful unraveling of their marriage, each page painting her as the devoted, fearful wife and Nick as the dangerous husband. The staged crime scene, a delicate balance, not too messy, not too violent, just enough to suggest a struggle, just enough to suggest something awful had happened. And then, the pièce de résistance. She vanished, gone, without a trace. Becoming someone else. Amy leans forward, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror of a dingy roadside motel. Her hands are steady as she takes the scissors to her hair. The first cut is the hardest. Strands of golden blonde tumble into the sink, curling at the edges like ribbons. Amy watches them fall. Goodbye, amazing Amy. Goodbye, the girl Nick fell in love with. Goodbye, the woman the world is mourning. She dyes what's left of it, mousy brown, the color of a woman no one notices. She changes her clothes, worn-out jeans, an oversized hoodie, sneakers that are scuffed at the toes. She is no longer Amy Dunn. She is someone else now, someone invisible. The escape. The bus smells like sweat and stale air. Amy sits toward the back, her head tilted down, her fingers gripping the strap of her stolen backpack. She doesn't look at anyone. She doesn't make conversation. She knows better than that. She knows how to disappear. The trick is not to be memorable. Be plain. Be forgettable. Be the kind of person who fades into the background. She folds her hands in her lap. She is a widow now, a ghost, and she has never felt more alive. Watching the chaos, Amy sits in a cheap motel room, legs crossed on the bed, a bag of vending machine pretzels resting on her lap. The television glows in the dim light. Nick's face fills the screen, his awkward smile, his carefully chosen words, his pathetic attempt at looking innocent. It's all so predictable. The reporters tear him apart. Why didn't Nick cry? Why did he smile in the press conference? Was Amy afraid of him? Amy leans back against the pillows, watching, her fingers idly tapping against her knee. She had gifted him the perfect crime, and he had walked right into it. Then, her favorite part, her parents, standing at a podium, holding hands, their voices thick with grief. They love her. They miss her. If anyone has seen our daughter, please, please help us bring her home. Amy sighs dramatically. Oh, Mom. Oh, Dad. If only you knew. The lies she wrote. She picks up her old diary from her duffel bag, flipping through the pages with delicate fingers. So much effort, so much care, each entry crafted with precision. Nick is losing his temper more often. I try to be the perfect wife, but it's never enough. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm scared. I think he might kill me. Amy grins. She had given them exactly what they needed. A villain, a poor, helpless victim. A marriage that unraveled piece by piece, until the only logical conclusion was murder. Nick will never escape it now, even if they never find her body, even if they never uncover a single shred of real evidence. He is doomed. And Amy is free. Her new life. She pays in cash. She uses fake names. She plays the part of the quiet woman traveling alone, always looking just wary enough to make people assume she is running from something. No one asks questions. No one looks too closely. Amy has thought of everything. She will settle somewhere new, somewhere small, somewhere Nick would never think to look. And she will start again, but Nick won't let go. Then, something changes. Amy is sipping bad motel coffee, flipping through channels when she sees it. Nick, on television. A different Nick, a smart Nick. He is playing the game now. Amy, if you can hear this, I love you. Amy sits up. She narrows her eyes. Come home, Amy. The audience loves him now. Nick Dunn, the devoted husband. Nick Dunn, the man who just wants his wife back. And worst of all, Nick Dunn, the man who finally figured her out. Amy's fingers tighten around the blanket. Her pulse quickens. He is not supposed to fight back. He is supposed to crumble, to break, to let her win. She exhales slowly, setting her coffee down. Oh, Nick. She tilts her head. You're making this fun. Amy Elliott. Dunn is dead. Amy Elliott Dunn is alive. Amy Elliott Dunn is coming home. Chapter 6. The Hideout and Betrayal. Amy Elliott Dunn is a woman without a past. No name, no history, no trail. That was the plan. She was supposed to disappear, to slip into the cracks of the world, unnoticed, untouchable. But plans have a way of unraveling. The motel. She has been hiding in a cheap roadside motel for days now. The kind of place where no one looks at you twice, where the walls are thin, the sheets smell like stale detergent, and the vending machine hums in the corner of the lobby. It's perfect, or at least it was. Amy sits on the edge of the bed, counting the cash in her lap, her lifeline, her freedom. She has been careful, paying in cash, avoiding eye contact, blending in. But people always notice something. The girl who doesn't belong. The woman with a too steady gaze, a too deliberate way of speaking. The ones who are running. And some people like to take advantage of that. The robbery, it happens fast. A stupid mistake. Amy had let her guard down, had trusted the wrong people. The girl at the motel, cheap extensions, nervous energy, an eager smile that had been too friendly, too curious. And the guy, his eyes too sharp, too knowing. They had watched her, waited, and when she was asleep, when her guard was down, they took everything, the money, her escape, gone. Amy wakes up to an open door, an empty bag, her heart hammering so loud it drowns out everything else. She searches the room, fingers trembling. Nothing. They didn't just take her cash. They took her plan. For the first time since she left, fear slithers in. Amy Elliott Dunn is not the kind of woman who gets played. She is the one who controls the game. But now she is trapped, broke, alone, and worst of all, desperate. Desi Collings. She hates herself for even considering it, for dialing his number, for letting his voice, smooth and slow, slither into her ear like an old song she had tried to forget. Amy, his voice is softer now, careful. I need help. There is a pause, a long, deliberate silence that makes her grip the phone tighter. Then, where are you? Desi Collings had always been obsessed with her, the perfect boyfriend, the perfect gentleman, the perfect safety net. And she had always known in the back of her mind that if she ever needed someone to worship her again, Desi would be waiting. The lake house. Desi drives her through winding roads, his expensive car moving smoothly, like it barely touches the pavement. Amy sits stiffly in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap, her skin prickling under his gaze. You look different, he says. I had to change, she murmurs. You could have come to me first, he says, almost scolding. She doesn't respond. The lake house looms ahead, tall, pristine, the windows gleaming even under the cloudy sky. A cage wrapped in silk. Desi leads her inside. The floors are polished, the furniture is perfect, and the doors have locks. You're safe now, Desi tells her. He kisses her forehead, his fingers brushing over her hair like she is something fragile, something his. Amy smiles, because this is what Desi has always wanted, and Amy knows how to give men what they want, until she doesn't. The trap. Days pass. Desi brings her meals. Desi brushes her hair. Desi watches her. Always. She plays the role perfectly. The fragile woman. The broken wife. The grateful lover. She lets him touch her. Lets him think she needs him. But inside, she is calculating. watching, waiting. Daisy thinks he saved her, but the truth is, Amy Elliott Dunn is still in control, and soon, she will prove it. Amy smiles sweetly at Desi over dinner, tilting her head just slightly. "I was thinking," she says softly, "maybe I should go out for a bit. Just some fresh air." Desi's face tightens. "No need for that," he says quickly. "I'll bring you anything you want." Amy nods, lowering her eyes. She knew he would say that. She knew he would never let her leave, which means she has to find another way. The escape plan. Desi thinks she belongs to him. He thinks he owns her now. He doesn't realize Amy Elliott Dunn is not something a man can keep. She is not trapped. She is waiting. She will let Desi play his part. She will let him think he is winning. And then she will do what she does best. She will rewrite the story. And when she is finished, Desi Collings will never see her coming. Chapter 7. Nick fights back. Nick Dunn is losing. The world has already made up its mind. He is the husband who didn't cry, the man who smiled at the wrong moment, the liar, the killer. But Nick Dunn has finally figured something out. Amy is watching, and if there is one thing Nick Dunn knows, it's how to play for an audience. Tannerbolt, the fixer. The lawyer's office smells like leather and old money. Nick sits across from Tannerbolt, the man with a reputation for saving guilty men. Nick isn't guilty, but that doesn't matter. What matters is perception. Tanner watches him carefully, steepling his fingers. "Tell me the truth, Nick. Did you kill your wife?" Nick exhales, gripping the arms of the chair. "No." Tanner studies him. "Then let's make America believe that." Nick leans forward. "How?" Tanner smirks, shaking his head. "We don't defend. We attack." The media war. Tanner wastes no time. By the end of the day, Nick is everywhere. Every news segment, every talk show, every online forum dissecting his every move. Do you think Nick Dunn killed his wife? Why didn't he cry? Why did he smile? Nick watches the headlines from the corner of Tanner's office. He is losing. And if he doesn't change the narrative, he won't just lose his reputation. He'll lose everything. He'll go to prison. And Amy will win. Nick won't let that happen. The interview, Nick's last shot. The studio lights are blinding. Nick sits, hands pressed together, calculating every movement, every breath. He cannot afford to misstep. The interviewer, sharp, precise, hungry, leans in. "Nick, did you kill Amy?" Nick doesn't blink. "Number, I love my wife." "Then why do people think you did it?" Nick sighs, raking a hand through his hair, making himself look just the right amount of exhausted. "Because I've made mistakes. I haven't been the perfect husband." The interviewer pounces. "What kind of mistakes?" Nick swallows. Here it is, the confession. "I cheated on Amy." The audience gasps. The interviewer leans forward. "You had an affair?" "Yes." Nick bows his head. "And I will regret it for the rest of my life." His voice is raw, not fake, not forced. Because the truth is, he does regret it. Maybe not for the right reasons. Maybe not in the way a good husband would. But Amy is watching. And this is for her. Somewhere, Amy watches. She is sitting on the edge of a motel bed, her legs crossed, her fingers tracing the rim of a cheap styrofoam cup. The television glows. Nick's face fills the screen. He looks different, sharper, more aware. Amy tilts her head. Interesting. She listens as Nick confesses his affair, as he humbles himself before America. She sees what he is doing. She sees the game he is playing. And for the first time, Amy smiles. Nick's final move. The interviewer isn't satisfied. Nick, if Amy were watching this right now, what would you say to her? A challenge, a chance. Nick inhales deeply, and then he looks straight into the camera. Amy, I love you. The audience gasps. Nick leans forward, his voice soft. You are the smartest person I've ever known. Amy's smile fades slightly. She leans in. You got me, Amy. Nick swallows. I wasn't good enough. I know that now. But you are brilliant. You are everything. Amy's fingers tighten around the cup. Come home, Amy. The words settle in the air. Nick holds his breath. And somewhere, miles away, Amy does too. The fallout. The next morning, Nick wakes up to a changed world. The headlines scream, Nick Dunn, broken husband or master manipulator. Cheating husband begs wife to come home. Is Amy out there? The tide is shifting. Slowly, but enough. Nick watches the news, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Margot sits beside him, shaking her head. You're playing with fire. Nick exhales. I know. But this isn't about the world. This isn't about clearing his name. This is about her, because he knows Amy. And he knows one thing for certain. She is watching, and she won't be able to resist. Amy's next move. In the motel room, Amy stares at the black screen of the television. She has turned it off. She doesn't like how it made her feel. Nick had never played the game well before, but now he is making her feel something. A challenge, a taunt. Amy sets the cup down slowly. Her mind is already turning. If Nick wants to play, she will show him what real winning looks like. Amy smiles, and somewhere, miles away, Nick does too. Chapter 8, Amy's Return. Amy Elliott Dunn is about to become a hero. All it takes is a little blood, and Desi Collings is about to give her plenty. The final plan. Desi thinks he owns her now. He has made it clear in the way he lingers too long when he touches her hair, the way he watches her as she sleeps, the way the locks on the doors click into place behind him. Amy knows what this is. She knows his kind of love, possessive, suffocating. Desi has been obsessed with her since they were kids, and now he finally has her. But Desi has never understood her, because Amy Elliott Dunn is not something you keep. She is something that happens to you. And tonight, Desi Collings is going to die. The seduction. Amy plays the part perfectly. The broken woman, the grateful woman, the victim who has nowhere else to go. She lets her voice tremble, lets her hands shake, lets him believe he is her savior. And when she kisses him, Desi doesn't hesitate, because men like Desi never do. He moans against her lips, his hands gripping her too tightly, like he finally owns her. And Amy smiles against his mouth, because Desi doesn't know. She has already won. The murder. She waits until he is deep inside her, moaning, his body tangled in hers. And then, the box cutter, a clean slice. His throat opens like a flower in bloom. Desi jerks, his eyes wide, confused. She watches as the panic sets in, as he realizes what is happening, as his hands fly to his throat. as his life drains out between his fingers. He gurgles, falls back, still. Amy wipes the blood from her mouth. Then she screams, because victims scream, and tonight, Amy is a victim. The grand return. The cameras flash as Amy stumbles into the driveway, barefoot, covered in blood, her nightgown soaked in it. Her hair is tangled, her lips cracked, her entire body trembling. She looks perfect, like the survivor they want her to be. Nick is on the porch, frozen, watching, and then she collapses into his arms. Nick catches her, holds her, feels her heartbeat against his chest, and in that moment, he knows Amy has won. She has rewritten the ending. She has made herself untouchable, because what kind of man accuses a woman covered in blood of lying? What kind of man accuses a woman who has just escaped her kidnapper of being a murderer? Not Nick Dunn, not if he wants to survive. The media frenzy. The headlines are immediate. Amy Dunn, miracle survivor. Kidnapped, tortured, but she escaped. Hero or angel? Amy watches the news from their bedroom, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea. She sees her own face on the screen, sees the way they adore her, the way they believe her. She cries during the interviews. She trembles when she tells the story of how Desi took her, how he locked her away, how he forced himself on her. She pauses at all the right moments, and the world devours it. Nick understands. Nick stands beside her, smiling, holding her hand, playing the role of the devoted husband, because he has no choice, because Amy has trapped him, because if he dares to go against her now, if he so much as breathes a word of doubt, he will be the monster. Nick Dunn, the man who couldn't love his wife enough. Nick Dunn, the man who cheated. Nick Dunn, the man who wanted her dead. And Amy, perfect Amy, will always be the hero. Amy wins. The world loves a comeback story. The world needs a villain. Amy knows this. And now she has everything she wanted. Her husband, her perfect life. Her name whispered in admiration instead of suspicion. And all it took was a little blood. Amy leans against Nick's shoulder. She whispers, so soft, so low, only he can hear. You're mine, Nick. Nick closes his eyes because he knows he has lost, and Amy never loses. Chapter 9, The Ultimate Power Play. Nick Dunn is trapped. He knows exactly who Amy is. A liar, a murderer, a manipulator. She framed him. She killed Desi. She orchestrated the perfect crime. And now she is back, playing the role of the beloved wife, the survivor, the victim who fought her way home. And the worst part, the world believes her. They worship her. And Nick is powerless. The frustration of knowing the truth. Nick stares at her from across the dinner table. Amy, perfectly composed, slicing into her steak, sipping her wine, as if nothing has happened. As if she didn't ruin his life. As if she isn't a monster wearing his wife's skin. He grips his fork tightly. You killed him. Amy looks up, feigning innocence. I saved myself. Nick leans in, voice low. You framed me, Amy. She smirks. But you're still here, aren't you? That's what infuriates him the most. That she knows. She knows he can't do anything about it. Because the moment he speaks, she wins again. Nick tries to expose her. Nick meets with Tannerbolt in secret. I need to expose her, Nick says, voice sharp, urgent. Tanner exhales. Nick, I have proof. I know she set me up. She admitted it. Tanner shakes his head. Admitted it to you. Where's the evidence, Nick? Where's the recording? Where's the confession? Nick's stomach twists. He has nothing. Amy is too smart for that. Tanner leans forward. The world adores her. If you go after her now, you will lose. Nick grits his teeth. I have to try. He won't let her win. He won't let her destroy him completely. He won't. And then Amy plays her final card, the pregnancy announcement. Nick wakes up to the sound of the TV, his own face on the screen. The reporter's voice is soft, reverent, and in a shocking, heartfelt revelation. Nick knows before he even looks. Amy sits on the couch, legs crossed, a hand resting delicately on her stomach. She smiles softly into the camera, timed perfectly, her voice breaking at just the right moment. Nick and I, we're going to have a baby. Nick's entire body goes cold. His breath catches. His vision blurs. Amy turns off the TV, looking at him, smirking. Surprise. The ultimate betrayal. Nick staggers backward. You're lying. Amy tilts her head. Why would I lie about something so wonderful? Nick's throat tightens. Because he knows Amy. She planned this. She stole his DNA. She used him in every way possible. And now she has tied him to her forever. There is no escape. Nick grips the bathroom sink, staring at his reflection. The bags under his eyes, the lines of exhaustion carving into his face. The man who has lost everything. Amy stands in the doorway. You'll be a good father, Nick. His knuckles go white. I hate you. Amy smiles, stepping forward, wrapping her arms around his waist. No, you don't. Nick stares at himself in the mirror, and the worst part, Amy is right. Because no matter how much he despises her, no matter how much he wants to run, to scream, to burn everything down, a part of him needs her. A part of him loves her still. And that part is his greatest weakness. The final scene, the perfect, twisted marriage. The cameras are outside. The world is watching. Nick and Amy step onto the front porch, hand in hand. Amy, glowing, radiant, the devoted wife, the expecting mother. Nick, standing beside her, the proud husband, the changed man. They smile for the cameras. They wave. They play their roles perfectly. Because this is the ending Amy wrote. Because Nick has no choice but to follow the script. Because Nick Dunn is trapped. And Amy never loses.